Hello, my name is Gil Penalosa, and this is Cities for Everyone, the webinar, where every other Tuesday I invite fascinating people to share with us their experience and knowledge so that all of us can become better advocates on creating equitable, sustainable, and fun cities so that everyone can live healthier and happier. Originally, I'm from Bogota, Colombia, but I've been living in Toronto, Canada for 26 years. And 20 years ago, I founded 880 Cities, a nonprofit organization. Over the last couple of decades, I've been lucky to have worked in over 350 cities. And this webinar is a way of giving back. Today, we have a fascinating presentation. Tourism, city tourism. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it a blessing or is it a nightmare? Well, the city councillor of San Sebastian in Spain, Victor Lasa, is going to do a presentation on the challenge of sustainable urban tourism. What is sustainable urban tourism? How to make it good? When is it positive? When is it negative? Victor, thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And we are eager to learn about this very important because almost of the hundreds of people watching, many live in touristic cities. Others, actually everyone, at some point, we are tourists. So tell us. Victor Lasa, welcome.
Thank you. Hi. Glad to be
Victor
here.
has a lot of experience in different countries around the world, and he lives in San Sebastian, where he is city councilor. San Sebastian is like a paradise. I've been there 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. It's like God was so generous with San Sebastian, but now they are getting a little bit overcrowded of tourism. And we hear the same in many, many cities around the world. So they are not saying no to tourism, but they are not saying yes to any type of tourism. So we are all here to learn. Victor, tell us a little bit about yourself, Victor.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you to everybody joining us from all around the world. I think this series of webinars are really useful, and I'm really glad to be part of it. Well, as Gil said, I'm a councillor in San Sebastian, which is my hometown, but I've spent the good part of the last 20 years living overseas. I've been lucky enough to live in eight different cities in four continents. So I've seen all kind of cities and all kind of policies, and what the result is. I completed a PhD in global social science with RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia, and I guess the situation in which my city finds itself is what motivated me to get into politics, because I saw that there was a lack of guidance and the city was entering really a minefield, so to say, without the right probably map in order to navigate it. So the problem of tourism was one of the main motivators and is one of the main drivers trying to implement policy in town. So I think I'll start sharing the screen now.
Yeah,
With the
please share the
presentation.
screen and start with the presentation. And actually, one of the things that people love is the local. But then some cities end up not being nothing, losing their soul. They are not local. They are not also touristic. They are nothing. So how to prioritize? So let's hear the challenge of sustainable urban tourism. And Victor Lasa, as a city councilor of San Sebastian, is going to use San Sebastian as a case. But with this, a lot of his ideas, if not all, are applicable anywhere. Thank you, Victor.
Yeah. Well, I think I start by saying how tourism is, of course, a global issue that many cities in the world face, and it's a pretty similar issue. I was going to say problem, but it's a pretty similar phenomenon all over. So the problems look alike. The solutions could also look alike, but as Jill is saying, we should discuss it. Generally, tourism is taken as a good thing. It's associated to economic development, and generally, traditionally, governments look for it, try to promote their cities and countries to attract tourism, and their main goal is to attract as much people as possible. That's been the conventional approach up until now. Many places, as you well know, are facing now the challenge of having too much of it, and thinking there should be a way to regulate this, because otherwise our cities are not gonna look anymore the way they used to look. And as Jill was saying, the local factor ends up kind of disappearing, and all places start to look too similar to each other. So, is there such a thing as sustainable tourism in an urban environment? And I would like to bring it even beyond. Is there such a thing as regenerative tourism in an urban environment? Meaning, can people live better because they live in a tourist destination, or are they sentenced to having only a negative impact by it? So with COVID, many people thought that the tourist industry was done, that it would take decades to recover, and the thing will be over soon. But very early on during the lockdowns, scientists, analysts already forecasted a quick recovery of the industry at a global level, because people will go back to traveling after lockdowns with more energy than ever. And they were right. We are almost at the point of recovery to pre-COVID levels. So the tourist industry is very strong in terms of numbers. 2024, so 1.4 billion international arrivals around the world. So more people are traveling more often to more places. And this, of course, brings incredible pressure to a lot of destinations. Traditional, let's so to say, traditional tourist destinations, but also others that were not on the map and are starting to become are starting to attract attention, as is the case of San Sebastian. Of course, there are some very obvious negative impact by the global tourist industry, starting with transport emissions, which will increase at 25% by 2030 if we compare it to levels of 2016, and will represent 5.3% of all human-made emissions, not only transport emissions, of all human-made emissions. So the tourism industry has already an obvious negative impact in terms of emissions on the planet in the fight against climate change. We'll try to go beyond these obvious impacts, but it's good to point them out. So tourism, I would like to try to divide or analyze the impact of tourism on two different areas. So one obvious area is nature destinations, places in the world that people go to because of its natural characteristics, and urban destinations. So starting with natural destinations, there are already some places in the world that have recognized that they are getting too much of a negative impact by over tourism, and this is actually deteriorating the destination, deteriorating the quality of life of the local people and the quality of nature, and as such is deteriorating the quality of the place as a tourist destination. So this is what's been called many times anti-economic growth, because the growth of the tourist industry is at the cost of its main asset, of its core asset, which is the actual destination. So the more it grows, the more it degrades what it's selling. So how will it end up? We know that the Great Barrier Reef is severely affected both by climate change and excessive visitors, and many areas have been naturally bleached now and are not anymore what they used to be. The government of Australia has been discussing for a long time what areas should be closed for some time or permanently. A typical example is Mai Bay in Thailand, which was made famous by the movie by DiCaprio, The Beach, and it became so famous everybody wanted to go there. It was overloaded, so the maximum capacity per day, so to say, even if it had never been fixed before, was surpassed by visitors, and the beach had to be closed because the environment was being severely damaged. Sad case of the Everest, sorry, too many people. You have to queue now these days to make it to the summit, and it's all full of rubbish, such a pristine place. And there are now many different movements and campaigns to try to get it fixed, but it's a massive challenge. The Masai Mara, the government of Kenya is already thinking of establishing regulation, as in how many people can go at the same time to the area and what kind of things they can or cannot do, because both the fauna, the animals, and the environment is being severely affected by too many visitors. There are examples in Europe like the Riffelsee Lake in Switzerland, where the environment was being affected, in particular the Edelweiss flower, because too many visitors were stomping around its growth area, so they had to establish kind of little reserves to keep it protected. And also some areas in the Americas, the Galapagos Islands are being affected. They have very obviously very fragile fauna and animals, and too many visitors, too much activity can affect also Machu Picchu and Grand Canyon. All these destinations affected by the same vectors of pressure. Too many people, too much transportation to a destination, no regulation around what areas can be visited or not visited. So if it's not regulated, it is deteriorated. And we have to have something in mind. The tourist industry is an extractive industry. And as any other extractive industry, it needs regulation. We are used to regulating the oil or gas industry or mining because we know they have a negative impact. We have to understand tourist industry as the same way. They are extracting something. In this case, they're extracting the capacity of people to have experiences in these places. But when it comes, I would like you to have this in mind. When it comes to urban tourism, what are they actually extracting and what's happening to this kind of extraction? I will reflect on that a bit later on. So the negative impact or over tourism in urban destinations. Well, as the same as with the nature destinations, there are some spots in the planet, and I'm sure you will have many other examples in mind that have recognized they have an actual problem with tourism. An industry that used to be beneficial for the city because it created wealth and employment is now over the limits. And I was going to say limits, but it's actually limits that have not ever been set. Very few cities have actually reflected on how many people are they capable of welcoming on a daily basis or on a yearly basis, and if they have recognized this number, what can or should they do about it? But some of these cities are already thinking that there has to be something that can be done. So Amsterdam and Venice in particular have been pretty pioneering in some of the measures, which we'll analyze a bit later, all linked to both strategic and tactical. Strategic being we are going to decide how many people can come every year to our cities, and then we're going to see how we can make that happen. In tactical thinking, on street level, what can we do to protect the public space and other areas from over tourism? The impact of our tourism can be divided in several areas. An obvious one, sorry, there's a little typo there, is housing affordability. The pressure on the housing market in many cities, and in particular in small to medium cities, is overwhelming. And locals can't afford anymore to live in their own cities. This is created both by an increase in demand for houses, because many visitors decide they want a holiday house in those destinations, for long-term rentals, for holiday, just for holidaying, or mainly for a tourist apartment, or what we call colloquially Airbnb and similar online platforms. A big part of the housing stock in many of these cities is now dedicated to temporary rents because they are way more profitable than your conventional medium to long-term rent. And the rent offer for locals is disappearing, and whatever is left has very high prices that locals can't afford. This, of course, translates into locals looking for alternatives elsewhere, either around their city or farther. So in practical terms, we're replacing locals with tourists, literally, in their houses and the apartments that they could be occupying. This has therefore an impact on the neighborhoods, because instead of locals having daily normal activities that you would find in a city, like going to work or buying groceries or going to school, is replaced by people having leisure times, buying different things in different kind of businesses, different needs, different goals. different uses of both the houses and the neighborhood. So the way of life in the city changes significantly. With also going to the third point, there is an excess crowding, there is congestion, there is noise, and this has a massive impact on public spaces. This affects traffic on the roads. This affects the capacity of public transport to transport people. This affects the capacity of people to just walk in the street or using their bicycles, but also affects the capacity of local people to go to the places they used to go. They always went since they were children, and that they would like their own children to go, and they are realizing how it's changing um, very, very radically, very rapidly. So these vectors of pressure, the housing, the displacement of the local population, the change in the nature of this, how streets are used, the change of the nature of the businesses and the shops has an obvious impact on the public realm and on the urban life of that city. So when I was talking about the tourism industry being an extractive industry, usually what they extract from cities is the way of life. Meaning, if you want to go to Amsterdam, you are going to go and visit a beautiful city, but also you want to see how people live there, what they eat, where they go to school, what kind of parks they use. And these experiences uh, deteriorate over time because of all the overcrowding and the absence of local people. So what the tourist industry is selling is of a lower quality of every time. So it is in the actual interest of the tourist industry to keep cities the way they were as much as possible, because otherwise they are not selling the same product to the visitors. They are not selling anymore your typical Amsterdam, your typical Venice, or your typical Barcelona. Now they have kind of a platform that is standardizing to global demand and offer, and it has less of a local flavor every day. Also, there's an important pressure on infrastructure and services like public transport, like energy, water management, and many others. There is an obvious impact also on the natural environment of the city, on the green infrastructures. The amount of parks and trees and their capacity of their ecosystemic services to service the population. There is a deficit then in what the green infrastructure can do for the population and what is actually going on. And there is an important loss of community and social cohesion that has a direct impact on the life of the locals that might start thinking, well, this city is not anymore my city, what it used to be. So even if they are not kicked out economically, they might be interested in going somewhere else or doing something else because they feel they're actually losing the city they used to know. And this is how I wanted to point out also that this challenge and what to do about it is an important challenge at different government levels. It's an obvious challenge for the local government, but many of the things that could be done, or many of the ways to regulate this situation, depends on higher levels of government, either regional or even national. And a lack of coherence and a lack of even ideological differences between these government levels creates a dysfunction in trying to regulate the place, and sometimes either nothing happens or whenever they try to do something, it's ineffective because some policies are contradictory, or some of the institutions trying to enforce them don't agree on them or don't talk to each other, and they make the problem even worse. So this is how we get to my little hometown, San Sebastian, which I have to say, it is a beautiful little place. And it's got a bit of everything. As you can see, it's in the northern coast, it's in Basque Country, very close, actually very close to the border with France in the Atlantic Ocean. It's got 3 beaches accessible from the city, which makes it really, really, really practical. And it's got 188,000 people, so it's not very big. It's got the perfect size to move around. to walk around, to get on bicycles, and public transport is a very accessible city in that way. And it's surrounded by mountains and nature, so it can't really grow physically, it can't extend. It's kind of that's the size it is, and that's the size it will probably remain. And it's got a very vibrant cultural life. One of the most well-known part of it is the food, but of course, as you might imagine, food comes with many other things. So it's kind of a mixture of things. And it's got a long history of tourism. It's not like a new phenomenon. It has increased exponentially in the last years. I will explain. So in the 1880s, the Queen of Spain decided to make this destination her summer destination, which brought a lot of what I would call elite tourism. And I use elite with the intention of saying aristocratic or exclusive, or definitely non-popular, but just for those who could afford it. So the city created luxury hotels, luxury spas, casinos. Actually, the city council where we work used to be the casino in town, and now it's the council. And that kind of tourism. So that kept evolving, and the new generations of aristocrats kept coming. They would buy houses, mostly people from Madrid with money. Then there were anecdotes like because Spain was a neutral country during World War One, this attracted wealthy families from other parts of Europe that settled there because we are very close to the border, and they many of them stayed, and they created international schools. So while being a little place, it's got things you would find in a bigger city, and it's got an international touch. It always had it. With the improvement of transport and a popularization of tourism, it became more of a beach destination from the 60s to the 90s. But always, how would I say it? It wasn't on the map globally. It wasn't a place everybody would know about, and it wasn't overcrowded. It still remained a local city with a normal day to day, which had tourists in the summer, but we could still go to the beach, and do our normal life. But that came the late 90s and early 21st century, and everything changed. Um, as I was saying, we have a very recognized food. I think we have the highest concentration of Michelin stars in the world, local restaurants, which sounds like a blessing, but it's become a magnet. And then people who come for the food discover everything else. As I was saying, the nice geography and the nice weather. We have a warm weather. It doesn't get too hot. It doesn't get too cold. And the many things you can do around. We are close to France. There are beautiful places in the Basque Country. So it's like, let's say, an ideal tourist destination. This said, it is my opinion that this could have been foreseen, the situation we find ourselves now of over tourism, because of the nature of the destination. It could have been foreseen that it was going to become a very important magnet for the tourist industry around the world, and some preparations could have been done, but they weren't done. So this is what's been going on lately. In the last 10 to 14 years, there has been a severe increase of hotels all around town that has transformed the city. And this is a typical piece of news you will find in the newspaper almost any day for the last years. A new hotel in the very center of San Sebastian. This building here is at the heart of the city, and it used to be a block of apartments. It was bought. All of them were bought by one single investor that transformed the block of apartments in a single hotel. And that has happened a couple of times around town. So what used to be a block with probably 30 to 40 apartments with locals, now it's a hotel. It's been the local content has been taken somewhere else. Only in between 2017 to 2023, 50% more rooms were included in the city. This is including hotel rooms and Airbnb style or apartment tourists offer. So you can imagine the huge impact. This is the current situation in terms of numbers. Number of hotels and hostels is 162, tourist apartments 1,300, which means the number of beds in hotels are around almost 4,000. The number of beds in Airbnb style apartments is almost 6,000. So we're talking about 10,000 rooms in a population sorry, 10,000 beds in a population of 188,000, which creates a massive floating population within town, linked to all the problems that I was mentioning earlier. In terms of economical contribution, there are around 13,000 people in the city working in something directly linked to tourism, and tourism represents around 14% of the local GDP, which is important, but it's now we're beyond the time when we measure a success by just GDP or the number of employment. As you well know, there are many other factors that have to be considered to know whether this economy or this activity is working or not. So this is the result. Any given day in peak season, which is peak season is harder and harder to recognize anymore because it used to be May to September, but now any sunny day of the year, you can actually find this situation. This is El Paseo de la Concha or La Concha Promenade, which goes around the bay and is your most typical thing to do as a local. You just go for a walk beside the beach to enjoy yourself. But as you can tell, it's not what it used to be anymore. And this is something that happens many days every year, not only in this area, but in many others. So you can picture what bars look like, shops look like, public transport, parkings, roads, etc. for a city of 188,000 people. So the number of tourists, meaning people who actually stay overnight in a hotel or apartment, is around 1 million per year, which is a 25% increase only in the last 14 years. And there is an unknown number of daily visitors that the government hasn't been able to calculate. That goes somewhere between 600,000 to 1.2 million, which has to be added to the people who stay overnight. So these are the two main vectors of pressure: people who stay overnight in hotels and people who come for the day. The people who come for the day can be locals from around the area or people who are traveling and stop over. There are a lot of people driving by car from France. French people and people who are tourists in France decide to cross the border because we're 50 minutes away from France and come and visit the city. There are people from the Basque Country and Spain that decide to come and they are staying somewhere else and come for the day. So this is a massive number of visitors for a small town like ours. This translates into a 10% extra people per day during the peak season, calculating the peak season from the 1st of May to the 31st of October, which puts a lot of pressure on everything. And unfortunately, because of the attraction of our food, 90% of visitors, and this has been studied by different levels of government, go to the city because they want to try the food. And this traditional food is concentrated in the old part of the city, which is that pink circle you see there. So that amount of people come specifically to spend most of their time in that area of the city, which has, of course, a massive impact there, but also waves of impact around the center of town, which you can see is, sorry, this part here. This is the promenade. I just showed you the photo with the beach. So we have the old part here, the center of town, and then it's expanding the way for other neighborhoods. This is where I grew up. It also has a beach and it's been fully gentrified per association. This area here is also becoming something very different. So slowly, as you can tell, things are changing fast. It's a big challenge. So this is one of the results. People are angry now. Polls show that over 83% of locals think we have reached peak tourism in the city, that it's affecting their lives severely every day, and that it should stop. And many people are talking about degrowth. This is a local platform called Bizi Lagunekin, which in Basque means with the neighbors. And they are saying, enough is enough. They are walking around the old part to say, look, we don't say there shouldn't be any tourism, but this is not sustainable. Somebody should be doing something. Full disclosure, I'm a councillor, but I'm not in government. I'm in opposition. So I have observed how the local government was denying the problem, rejecting that there was any issue for the last 10 years, saying, your mantra that tourism is good, tourism brings growth, wealth, and employment, and nothing should be done about it. And, don't complain because sometimes you are a tourist also somewhere else, which is, of course, very frustrating if you think about it. because what we were saying is, look, tourism has always been an issue in the cities, has consequences. We're not saying there shouldn't be any tourism, but do something about it. So things like this are happening. San Sebastian applied to be one of the destinations for the future World Cup in Spain, which will be hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco in 2030. And many people are saying no, not just because they are angry, but because they are wondering, why exactly do we need to be put on the map like this? Again, is this part of a well-designed strategic tourism model for the city, or is this just the produce of one institution saying this is good, the other one is not sure, so this one applies, this one doesn't say anything, and then this happens and we have to manage it. We know that any of these games can be watched by hundreds of millions of people, and San Sebastian is not in a place right now that needs more promotion. I wanted to also make the point that I want to give a couple of information about the housing situation. San Sebastian is the most expensive town in Spain when it comes to housing. It's always been expensive, but the last 6 to 7 years, the situation has become completely ridiculous. The square meter average price is around 6,000 euro, which is way more expensive than many cities in Europe, where salaries are 3 or 4 times what locals get here. There are no apartments for rent. And the result is that two-thirds of under 35-year-olds still live with their parents because they can't afford to rent or buy an apartment in their town. And this is becoming more and more difficult because added to the pressure that there was in the housing market before, we have to add now investment funds that come to try and buy buildings to turn them into hotels, or come and try to buy apartments to put them on Airbnb, and foreigners who love the city and want to buy an apartment there. So now locals compete with, Americans, Germans, people from the UK, from Ireland, who love the city and want to have a holiday apartment. And there is no regulation about it. And that's the most horrific consequence of this, that the locals are actually physically being kicked out. So I'll try to finish now. What can we do about it? Well, the government finally recognized there was a problem, and in 2023, just 3 months before the elections, decided that there would be a temporary suspension of hotel licenses, which is still in place and will be in place until 2026. So right now, nobody can open a hotel anymore, but there's going to be a new legislation that will divide the city in two areas, one being saturated and one not being saturated, and in the non-saturated, there could be hotels. There are no more licenses for tourist apartments, but there are already 1,300 in town, 5,000, 6,000 beds. There are cruising ships coming to a nearby port, which is a 5-minute drive from the city. Nothing is being done about it. There's been a limit to organized groups of 25 people per group only, but there are no limit as how many groups there can be at the same time, because there are most of them in the old part, and what's the schedule for the groups. There are no attempts to regulate charter transports like buses arriving every day with visitors. And there has not been a calculation of, is there a maximum capacity of people visiting town every day? And should somebody do something about it? And can we take this farther away? Can we have regenerative tourism? Can we charge a tourist tax like it's done somewhere else, and make sure that 100% of this income is redistributed and reinvested in town, and give, for instance, public transport to the locals, or free museums, or better healthcare, or things that the locals, so that locals can see that they are also benefiting from this exercise. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. That's what I presented, and I think I'll stop here so not to overtalk, and pass it over to you. Thank you.
So, Victor, last question. Then, what do you think should be the priorities of cities around the world, but not only cities, but tourists? What should tourists think? What should they be mindful when they are tourists? What is the difference of being sustainable, urban tourism, and unsustainable? What would be the top priority that you would emphasize?
You're going to have an impact as a tourist wherever you go. Think about this impact. How do you want it to be? You want to be part of the problem or of the solution? how do you reduce your impact in an urban area? As I was saying earlier, go local as much as possible, stay in a locally owned hotel, ignore Airbnb or similar offers. Try to eat local in locally owned places. Um, Try to make sure that wherever you go, the people who work there are working under good working conditions. And I know this is a bit demanding, but do your research if you want to have a good impact wherever you're going. Have a look. There is a lot of stuff written about this. Ignore McDonald's or Starbucks or anything you know when you get there, because these big franchises are taking over all the commercial venues. So local businesses can't afford anymore to pay rents. So somebody like McDonald's comes in and takes it over. So don't give them business. Um, so make your presence as light as possible. Be part of it instead of being um, just a witness. Try to listen to the local conversation. Ask people what's their favorite part of their town instead of asking them, where the best food is. Um, and make people see that you went there because you are very interested in their culture and you want it to remain the way it was before you got there.
Victor, thank you very, very much. What a great, you give us a lot of food for thought. Thank you very much. I hope you get more
Thanks everybody
sustainable.
for connecting. This was wonderful. Thank you.
Victor, thank you. Thank you. What a fascinating presentation on a most important topic, because how to have cities that are touristic and stay really, really good for the local people, because the priority has to be the residents. And actually, that's why they are touristic, because people want to go and want to see a unique city. They don't want to see a city that looks like any other one. So we have learned how to make tourism that is a win-win, good for the locals, but also good for the people that want to visit those cities. Please, once you watch this video, share it. Share it with decision makers, elected officials, with the media, with city staff. And keep watching Cities for Everyone, the bi-weekly webinar.